Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to part 5 of 5 books in 5 weeks. We got a lot of ground to cover today, so buckle your seats, buckle your seatbelts. And we have no competition tonight. The State of the Union is in competition to this class. Football, basketball, nothing is competition to our Torah learning that's going on here. So with that, we left off last 5 books in 5 weeks. We left off and we did the portion of Mishpatim. Mishpatim is civil laws, and that is the 6th of the 11 portions in Exodus. Before we begin, I want to dedicate today's class to the speedy recovery, to the Refuah Shalema of Yisrael Moshe ben Rata Masha, and to our dear friend, I don't know his Hebrew name, but the Talmud tells us a very incredible thing, that if you don't know someone's name, if they're your friend, you don't need to mention their name. Because God knows who's important to you, and therefore we're going to have it dedicated to our dear friend from Sugarland. So you should have a speedy recovery, and God willing, we should only hear happy and good news from everyone. So we are in Exodus right now, and we're talking about the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel had just received the 10 Commandments, and we started getting the laws. The first selection of laws are given to the Jewish people. Then we're talking about the building of the tabernacle, which is the next 5 portions. Teruma, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayikra, and Pekudei are 5 portions, all dealing with the building of the tabernacle. The first 2 are Moses gets the instructions, the structure and the vessels, the priestly garments. Then you have in middle, the third of the 5 here, are dealing with the golden calf. And then you have the nation is actually building the structure and the vessels and crafting the garments. All right. So in particular, if you go to Parshas Teruma, we have the tabernacle, God's dwelling place in our midst while we travel through the desert. So it's important never to leave God home. Right? You bring God with you. If you go on vacation, bring God with you. If you go out on a trip someplace, make sure you bring God with you. The Jewish people, wherever they travel, have God with them. Right? We always have God with us. We take that tabernacle and it travels along with us. Our sages tell us that the tabernacle is a microcosm of the entire universe. And I would highly urge everyone out there to listen to the amazing podcast by my dear brother, Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe, on the topic of Jerusalem, because you'll learn so much about the temple in Jerusalem and what's at the center of the temple in Jerusalem being the birthplace of creation. Moses gets the instruction on how to build the temple. He has the blueprint of the tabernacle, the design of structure and vessels, the ark, the cover, the table, the menorah, the walls, the partitions, the altar, the courtyard. All of that is described in great detail in Parshas Teruma. In Parshas Tetzaveh, the 8th portion in Exodus, has the humanly side of the tabernacle. Right? Moses gets the instructions of how to design the priestly garments, the vestments. Now we know that there was the high priest, and there was the simple priest. The simple Kohen had 4 garments. A typical, obviously not typical, but the priests would wear 4 garments, specific garments, but the high priest would wear 8 garments, right? He would wear an apron, a robe, a hat, a breastplate, a head plate, a coat, breeches, and a belt. And if we look on you don't have these sheets yet, but we have over here the 8 different vestments. I'm sorry, I don't have an office yet. Right? This Hurricane Harvey took us for a ride. But if you email me, you know what? If you email me at awolbe@torchweb.org, I'll happily email you the PDF of these classes, the outline. So, and otherwise, in future weeks, as soon as we're up and running here, I'll be able to print everybody a copy of it so that you have it. Okay, the next portion is Parshas Kisisa. In Parshas Kisisa, we have the census. Again, we said that this is about the golden calf, but we have the census where God instructs Moses and Aaron and the leaders to count the Jewish people. Moses designates builders for the tabernacle. God reminds us, observe the Shabbat, right? It's not enough to just know it's the day of Shabbat, but to actually watch and protect and remember the Shabbat. Moses receives the tablets. Don't forget that what was written on the tablets was told to us back 4 portions ago in Parshas Yisro, right? In the 5th portion, we got, which is actually this week's parsha that we're going to read in synagogues this coming week. So it's a beautiful connection between what we're learning and what's going on in current events in the Jewish people, among the Jewish people. So we're reading the portion of receiving the Torah. But the actual physical tablets were not given till later, when Moses ascends the mountain, right, and comes down now 40 days later with the tablets. And then he comes down, what does he see? He sees the golden calf. He sees the golden calf. Terrible, terrible thing. God gets very angry. Moses prays. Moses descends. He breaks the tablets. Moses begs forgiveness. And then the atonement is actually given to the Jewish people on Yom Kippur. And God says, forever this day will be a day of atonement. Vayomer Hashem salachti kidvarecha. I forgive you as per your request. And this is a day which is forever designated for atonement for all of our sins. Moses, all of my sins. Y'all don't sin, I know. Y'all are all holy and righteous people. But sadly, you're in the presence of a unrighteous, unholy, sinful individual. So Moses pleads for closeness to God. Closeness is granted, but limited. And then we get a second set of tablets. The 13 attributes of mercy are declared. It's one of the things that Moses learns in that process, the different elements of God's mercy. And then we have the renewal of the covenant, a renewed commitment where the Jewish people are saying, you know what, we're ready to take this on again. This obligation to observe the Torah and observe the mitzvot. Now, the breaking of the tablets, right? What is this breaking of the tablets? Now, we know these tablets were very, very special. These tablets were miraculous tablets because it says that our sages explain that these tablets, imagine if you have I'll just take a book here, okay? So imagine you had this book, but you'd see the letters through the entire book. But then when you turn it to the side, you see the letters through the book. And when you turn to this side, you see the letters through the book, and this side as well. So that's the way that the Jewish people were surrounded around this mountain, and whatever direction you were looking from, you'd see right through. The letters were, I guess, engraved all the way through the stone, and you'd be able to see through the stone to the other side, to the sky, to the heaven. And that would be from all, it was a miraculous stone. Now, I know that in the movie of the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston is busy chiseling out the Ten Commandments. Well, that's not accurate. That's the second set. He chisels it and then he breaks it. It's just factually wrong. What happened was the first set was the miraculous God-given set. The second set, he had to work hard for it. And he had to chisel that out. Now, the first set, he broke. And those pieces, the shivrei luchot, the broken parts of those tablets, were placed in the ark. The second set of tablets that he chiseled out was also placed in the ark. And Maimonides and other commentaries explain how in such a small ark they were able to fit the new tablets, the original broken tablets, and some other things that were also placed into the ark. But I think it was a critical moment for the Jewish people. We all need wake-up calls. And sometimes the wake-up call is harsh. Sometimes that wake-up call is aggressive. And one of the things that, by the way, Moses is lauded by God. He's praised by God for Yiyasher Kochacha Al Asher Shivarta, where God praises Moses for breaking the tablets. You did the right thing. The Jewish people were deserving of losing these tablets. Allowing such a thing to happen just after having the revelation of God at Mount Sinai, it's shocking that how can they be at such a level? But yet we see an amazing dedication by Moses and the Jewish people to reaffirm that commitment, to renew that vow between them and the Almighty. Vayakel, the 10th portion of Exodus, speaks about the Sabbath. We have the Sabbath, we have the contributions to the tabernacle, we have the construction of the tabernacle, we have the craftsman selected, which is Bezalel ben Uri ben Huri was selected. God says, take that guy. This is a talented, gifted craftsman. Which also tells us, very interesting, that the Talmud that we learned in our Talmud lunch learn on Fridays at 12 o'clock at the Torch Center. So one of the ideas that we learned was that God has an incredible miracle that is embedded into each individual, is that every person loves their craft. God made people who love to deal with plumbing, and some people who love to deal with electricity, and some people who love to deal with roofing, and some with air conditioning, and some with diamonds, and some with jewelry, and some with car washes, and some with oil change, and some with building airplanes, and some with teaching Torah. Right? God created a world where we're not all the same. We all have different fingerprints. We all have different faces. We all have different ideas. We're all unique. And God gives everyone the ability to succeed in their field. Not everyone here could be a professor in mathematics, for example. Right? But God made people different. God created every single one of us with our own uniqueness. And that's such a beautiful thing. We should embrace that. Don't run away from who you are. Embrace it. And be the best you can be. Notwithstanding that, Bezalel was chosen to be the craftsman of the temple. He had it special. God says, this is the guy I gave the talent to. He was modest. He had the character as well as the skill. So he was selected. Now, as mentioned, the beginning of this portion of Vayakel, we also had the Sabbath. Again, we see that it's not a coincidence that whenever we're talking about the tabernacle, we are also talking about Shabbos. There's a reminder about Shabbos, keep my Shabbos, protect my Shabbos, watch my Shabbos, remember the Shabbos, protect it, remember it. All of these reminders, always in the midst of all of the conversation of the tabernacle. Is it a coincidence? Absolutely not. Our sages teach us that the reason they're so intertwined is to teach you, just like we do in all of our Torah learning. There are 13 principles of how we learn Torah. And those 13 principles are found in most prayer books, right before the verses of praise. It says there are 13 principles by how we learn Torah. One of them is by association or by juxtaposition. There's a reason why we have certain things next to one another. And when the Torah so many times puts Shabbos next to the tabernacle, it's to tell you that the building of the tabernacle and all of its similar activities are prohibited on Shabbat. So just like they needed to bake bread for the tabernacle, for the showbread, or they needed to create dyes for whatever it was for the garments, or for the tapestry that was there. So those same activities are prohibited on Shabbat. It's not the rabbis made up a few rules. This is the Torah telling us very important guidelines of how to observe Shabbat. So what we have here is this juxtaposition of Shabbat and the building of the tabernacle constantly intertwined. to tell you the 39 different labors that you have. Do we have that book, the Shabbos book, or was it flooded? Can you just look if there's the colorful... You know what I'm talking about? The kids one? No, I think it was flooded. I think it was flooded. We're going to have to reorder it. But every labor that was done in the tabernacle is one of the 39... Our sages break them down to 39 different labors. For example, building, construction, and destruction, disassembling. Right? That was part of what was needed for the tabernacle. You had to construct it and deconstruct it. Well, that's prohibited on Shabbat. Now, that's not referring to toys for children. Right? So if there's Legos or blocks that kids play with, that our sages tell us you can be lenient with. But actual construction we don't do. So there's many different forms of construction. Right? We don't assemble a stroller on Shabbat. Right? We don't assemble things that you have a nice piece of furniture from IKEA or from Hofer furniture, right? So you don't assemble it on Shabbat, but it comes fully assembled. No, yeah, Hofer furniture. Right. What's that?
We do the assembly.
You do the assembly, right? So we don't do that assembly on Shabbat, right? Same thing. We don't do the opposite of that, the disassembly or the deconstruction of objects on Shabbat. But that's just one of the principles, right? Another example is they needed to, in order to travel, they would move these beams and all of these things from one location to another location. What do we learn from that? That on Shabbat we don't carry from one domain to another domain. What is the one domain to another domain? From a private domain to a public domain. So taking something from our private property to the public street would be moving something from a domain to a domain, which is prohibited. On a technical, right? So now, in most religious neighborhoods, you'll have an eruv. And what the eruv is sort of makes like a boundary around the neighborhood that now you can carry within that area. But you also have neighborhoods, you also have... I'll give you a technical example. Okay? So you ordered your Amazon item and it arrives on Shabbos. So you see the UPS guy coming to your doorstep. You cannot take it from him. He can put it down. You can take it if you know that there's not anything that is prohibited to be touched on Shabbat. Then you can move it perhaps. You're certainly not supposed to open it on Shabbat, but are you allowed to actually physically take it from him? Not allowed to. Why? Because there's two parts of carrying. There's something called the akira, which is lifting it up from the ground. Part one. Part two is putting it back down on the ground in another domain. So here he's picking it up in public domain and now giving it to you in private domain, and you're putting it down. So you're sort of clinching that prohibited task. So
what if he puts it on the porch?
Yeah, so he can put it down and then that's done. He did it. Right? That's not a problem. Okay? So I don't want to get into the specifics or the technicalities of all of the laws because there are so many beautiful, beautiful laws of the 39 laws of Shabbat. We've discussed them in some of the classes in the past, but just to give you some idea how the activities that were necessary for the construction of and the activities going on in the tabernacle are prohibited on Shabbat. The next portion, Pikudei, the 11th portion, talks about the craft of the garments, and that's Aaron's vestments, and Moses approves of them, how they were done, and then the tabernacle is erected. We have the assembly of the people, and God's presence rests in our midst, and the cloud descends. It's very interesting. That concludes Exodus. It's very interesting that whenever the Jewish people traveled, they traveled with these clouds of glory, right? Bamud Esh Balayla, they would have a pillar of fire that would, wherever they went, they always had this pillar of fire protecting them, and they had these clouds of glory surrounding them. Now imagine in the desert. Anybody ever been to the desert? It's very, very hot. It's not very, very pleasant to live there. Right? You step on the sand in the desert. You burn your foot. So what was the plan for the Jewish people in the desert? How are they going to survive living there for 40 years in this unbelievable heat? They don't have food. They don't have anything. So we know that the Jewish people had this miracle called the manna, where God had manna descend at the doorstep of every home. And then what happened? The Jewish people had a cloud beneath them, so when they stepped on the ground, they didn't burn their legs. They had a cloud above them, so the sun, the rays of the sun, wouldn't exhaust them with the heat. And surrounding them, they had clouds. So we had 6 clouds surrounding us at all time. Right? One on each side. Right? North, east, west, south. Right? And then they had above and below. What our sages tell us a very interesting thing, though. When you have 6 sides covered, what is created? A box. But there's something inside that's precious. You can store something in it. Those are the 6 days of the week that protect the Shabbos that's inside it. It's not just that you have these 6 dimensions, right? But now it creates a Shabbos. When we work hard on those 6 days of the week, which is our obligation, we don't have 2 days of rest a week. Shabbos and Sunday, right? We have Shabbos, right? Sunday's a work day, right? Take the kids out, right? Do the shopping, whatever it is that's necessary. We have 6 days, and that's the special gift that we have is that we have Shabbos, a day of rest. Okay, we begin the book of Vayikra, Leviticus. Let's see if we can do this in 5 minutes. Vayikra talks about the relationship with God. It's keeping God in our midst at all time. It's about living holy. And we have 10 portions in the book of Vayikra and Leviticus, and 27 chapters, and 859 verses. 10 portions. You ready for this? Vayikra, the first one. Now, the first 8 talk about the use of the tabernacle, the sacrifices, holiness. The last 2 talk about the holiness of the land. So, the first 2 follows introduction to the offerings. The first portion is talking about the people's relationship to the offering, right? The rules of the offering, different types of offerings. And then the second portion, Parshat Tzav, my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, deals with the priest's relationship with the offerings. It talks about the altar, the ashes, more offerings, different types of offerings, the gift to the priests, and the consecration of the Kohanim, and how they became a priest. The third portion deals with the priests. It's Aaron, the high priest, is consecrated as the high priest. The priestly service begins. We have the death of Nadav and Avihu, who were the sons of Aaron, who were excited to perform their labor in their work in the tabernacle. And one of the amazing lessons that we learn from this is Aaron's response by Yidom Aaron. Aaron is numb, and number 2 is that we see that that God loves excitement, but there's a limit to it. Just because you're excited about something doesn't mean that you do whatever you want to do. Especially not to bring offerings when God didn't ask you to. Right? There are rules. And you don't just do whatever you want. So that's an important thing for us to remember in our service of God. Yes, it's important. You know what? You're excited about synagogue. You want to get involved, so you decide you're going to change around, where everyone sits, and you're going to decide. You can't just because you're excited doesn't mean you can get to do whatever you want, right? And the detailed laws for Aaron are elaborated. We have the laws of kosher. You are what you eat. Judaism believes you are what you eat, and if you eat holy, you become holy. If you eat unholy, you become unholy. The permissible and the forbidden foods. We have in the back, in those back pages that you don't have, I'm sorry, I have a quick summary of the kosher foods. So I'll read this to you. 5 different categories. Number 1, land animals. They must be properly slaughtered, soaked, salted, rinsed. They have to have split hoofs, right? Only a pig has has this single feature alone. And they have to chew their cud. Only a camel, arnevet, and shafan have this single feature. Leviticus 11, 1 through 8. A fish, no slaughtering required. It has to have fins and it has to have scales. No fish has scales without fins as well. None. Leviticus 11, 9 and 10. And Deuteronomy 14, 9 and 10. Birds and fowl must be properly slaughtered, soaked, salted, and rinsed. Many kosher birds, like a pigeon, dove, duck, chicken, turkey, and birds of prey are not kosher. So if you like ravens, like how they fly. Okay? Not how they taste. Insects, bugs, water creatures are all forbidden. And fruits and vegetables are all kosher.
Well, what about locusts?
Whoa, 1 second. We can get into. There are some exceptions, but because today we don't know what is what, so we refrain from eating them all. Fruits and vegetables are all kosher. However, many leafy greens must be washed and checked for tiny bugs and insects. Those of you who want to learn more about that, we can discuss that at another time. But I know that we buy these big heads of lettuce, 6 packs, generally in Costco, and every single leaf is checked. We actually have a special light that's sold. It's called the kosher lamp, not the kosher lamp, but it's called the bug lamp or something like that. And each leaf is looked through, and you can see if there's any bug. You can see it very clearly, but it's right there, right? You can see it, and it's an important thing because, right, bugs, we're not allowed to eat bugs, and especially even if you're having salad, that's an important thing. People who want to be cautious about eating kosher. I've heard, sadly, some of my friends have told me that, I don't eat non-kosher out. I don't eat non-kosher in restaurants. I don't eat non-kosher in the house, but I will eat salads. Right? So it's a great thing that they're not eating non-kosher meat and not kosher chicken, or any other non-kosher shellfish or things like that. But those little bugs might be in those salads. And 9 out of 10, if it's not rinsed and washed properly and checked, that there may be bugs and insects in those things. Just as a general rule, even if not for kosher, it's not exactly something pleasant to think about. Yes?
Packaged salad greens with a hechsher?
Right. So if it has a hechsher, that means yes,
Okay.
absolutely. That's why there's a hechsher. The hechsher is the kosher symbol. For example, if you buy Dole coleslaw or Dole purple cabbage, or so those are checked. They're rinsed, they're usually triple rinsed and soaked, and again they're checked before they're packaged to ensure there is a service. There is a service in Houston. There's an individual who does check, so you can buy ready-made. It's not cheap, but again, it saves you that hassle if you don't want to check for bugs. You had a quick
What if
question.
fruit is produced in Israel?
Oh,
like
so
grapefruit, and
right.
it's harvested
So
at the 7th year.
7th year. So that's true. Fruits that grow in the land of Israel during this sabbatical year aren't prohibited, but you're not allowed to buy them. Right? They're not. You can walk into any field in the land of Israel in the 7th year to pick off a fruit, take a watermelon, and enjoy it. All right, free. No one's allowed to charge for it. Now, why do they charge? Because they want to maintain their crops. So what they do is they're not charging for the fruit; they're charging for the labor of the people who are actually picking it and packaging it and shipping it. But even that, many people have issues with that, which is why we try to avoid, because we don't even know if something was grown in the land of Israel. Still, you have to give the tithe. You have to remove parts of it. The first crops have to be set aside. So, therefore, we're a little bit more cautious when it's fruits that come from the land of Israel.
I have a question about this too. Isn't there like a certain number of years that you are not supposed to harvest apple trees, for example? And if you do harvest them,
Yes. So the first few years of a fruit tree are not supposed. You're not supposed to touch the tree, right? We can get into
Is that 3 years or 5 years?
It's 4 years.
Yes,
It's 4 years. All right. It's okay. Well, we can get into it. It's the first 3 years you don't touch it, and we can get into the specific details of it. but it's not in the scope of this work right now. So earthly, so we said split land animals, split hooves and chew their cud, fins and scales with fish, birds, no birds of prey. Now this is very interesting. There is a bird called a chasida. Anybody know what that bird sounds like? Chasida. Well, chasid. What is a chasid? Chasid is someone who does chesed, someone who does acts of kindness, right? So it's interesting that there's a bird called a chasida because it does tremendous kindness, but it's not a kosher bird. Isn't that ironic? It's a bird that does tremendous kindness. That's how it got its name, but it doesn't have kosher qualifications. Why not? Our sages tell us a very important thing we learn from the chasida. Although it does acts of kindness, it only does acts of kindness if you're of its kind. But if you're not my kind, I'm not helping you. Oh, you're not part of my family, I can't help you. You're not part of my group of friends, I'm not going to help you. Right? So we have to be very careful that as people who want to have that holiness of being kosher in our actions and our good deeds, we're not exclusive with our acts of kindness to only benefit our own family and our own friends, but rather we're out there to help everyone of all types. Yes?
Is that bird extinct?
What's that?
Is that bird extinct?
No, I don't believe so.
You've seen those?
It looks like it looks like, what is those things that they're like pinkish orangish? A flamingo. It looks like a flamingo. That's the type of bird I've seen. In one of the books that was flooded, we had actually a picture of it. We're going to hopefully get that replaced shortly. All right, fish. So insects, earthly creatures, creepy crawlers, almost none. I say it's almost none. And contamination of animals, the laws of contamination of animals, objects that receive contamination from again a dead animal or from a dead human. Different laws of holiness and purity. The prohibition of eating creepy creatures. All in Parsha Shmini, the third portion of Leviticus of Vayikra. The fourth is, but just by the way, very interesting thing. Vayikra it's a very interesting that the first letter of Vayikra is the first word of Vayikra. The last letter of the first word is small. It's shrunk. It's very small, and that was Moses sort of being humble. It's like, oh wow, God called upon Moses. Moses felt like it would be sort of like a sign of arrogance, right? So he made the aleph small, where it's not sort of being showy. Right? It could be read differently in not such a kind way of as being called on by God, and which is why he made sure that the aleph was there, but the aleph would be a small one to show his not for show of his humility, but I guess it was a display of his humility. So the fourth portion is Tazria, and Tazria and Mitzorah deal with the holiness of the body. It's laws of human contamination, childbirth and purification, saras, leprosy, affliction, clean speech. Clean speech is critical in Jewish observance. We don't just say what we want. We take responsibility for the words that we say, because when we're unclean with our mouth, it has devastating effects on those around us. It talks about inflammation, burns, baldness, metzora, isolation, and garments. These are all ideas that are discussed in the portion of Tazria, different indicators of God's unpleasantness with our spiritual status. Then we have Parshas Metzora, the fifth portion in Leviticus. We have the three stages of Metzora's purification. We have arrogance teaching us to move that arrogance to humility. We see the laws of shaving, about the laws of a blade is not allowed to touch our face. Right? We're not allowed to take a razor, a Gillette razor, and just shave our face like that. Particularly, there are 5 bones, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that cannot be touched by a razor. So you ask, how do I shave? That's why many people have the custom of growing a beard and not cutting it at all. So with the advance of technology like shavers that are machine shavers, that's one way to shave. Again, if it does not have lift and cut. And there's another way that people shaved, which was not with a razor, but rather with a certain type of, I don't know what they call that type of cream that they would put on and then use a plastic, whatever it is, but they wouldn't use a metal blade. So that's also, if you go for a haircut, I've had this numerous times, I go for a haircut, and the barber tells me, do you want me to shave your, I'm like, no, don't put that razor on my face, okay? It's a biblical prohibition for every hair. So that's one of the...
Why did you shave? You used to have a bigger beard.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, the only reason I would have the beard is, aside for personal reasons, but is when we have the counting of the Omer, and that's a time we're not supposed to have any haircuts or any type of shaving, and between the 3 weeks between the fast of the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av, those are the 2 times, and during holidays. So during the 8 days that are observed in diaspora of Passover, the 8 days of Sukkot, also times that we don't shave anywhere between those 8 days.
But it's very bad for your health also to use a razor because it's supposed to like cut your skin. And
Right. So here's the thing: we don't observe it because it's not good for our health. We observe it because God said so.
Right.
Right. It happens to be that there are other great benefits. Right. All right. We speak about offerings. Offering for a poor mitzorah. Mitzorah is someone again who has leprosy. Impurity and purification of a house that has leprosy. Bodily impurities, male and female discharges are discussed as well in the portion of Mitzorah. In Parshas Achrei Mos, I don't know if we're going to be able to get done everything. Maybe next week we'll do Numbers and Deuteronomy, but let's at least finish. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more portions in Leviticus. Achrei Mos. Achrei Mos deals with the death of Nadav and Avihu. We're instructed to follow the rules. Aaron accepts judgment with love of his 2 sons. We have the discussion of the teaching of the Yom Kippur service, confession, incense, the he-goat, eternal commandment of Yom Kippur, where Yom Kippur will forever be a day of atonement. The service outside the tabernacle. We have the commandment not to eat blood. If you have a cut on your finger, make sure not to put that blood in your mouth, right? Because it says ki adam hu nefesh. The blood is the soul, right? What you could do is you could rinse it. There are other things you could do, but you don't eat blood. Yes?
What if the cut's in your mouth?
The cut's in the mouth, that's different. There's no way to avoid that. That's a good question. Covering of blood, that's another thing. After an animal is slaughtered, we have to cover the blood with earth. All right? We can get it, again, each one of these things are such incredible teachings and lessons, and it's just amazing. So we're not doing justice by running through this, but again, just give us the ideas of what's going on in the Torah. And the forbidden relationships. No relationship. A man is not allowed to have a relationship with his mother, a father's wife, a sister, a father's wife's daughter, a son's daughter, a daughter's daughter, a woman and her daughter, a woman and her son's daughter, a woman and her daughter's daughter, a father's sister, a mother's sister, a father's brother's wife, a son's wife, 14 different types of relationships.
Sisters are okay?
No. And brother's wife, a brother's wife, except if there is yibum. Yibum, what is yibum?
That's when the husband dies and there's
Right. That's right. A levirate. So here's what happens. A man is married to a woman, and they don't have any children, and the man dies. It's a mitzvah for the brother to marry the widowed. Oh, I'm sorry. There's nothing left in the cup. All right. So it's a mitzvah for the brother to marry the widow, and to restore his brother's memory. A wife's sister. Right.
Didn't they forbid them already?
a wife sister.
I think that levirate marriage was forbidden.
No, it's been done. You can, if you look on YouTube, you'll find the video of a recent one, over the past couple of years. A beast, right? Bestiality is prohibited by the Torah. Homosexuality is prohibited by the Torah. A married woman, prohibited by the Torah, unless it's your own wife, obviously. And a menstrually impure woman, again, Leviticus 18, is also prohibited for a man to be with his wife when she's during that time. And sodomy, bestiality, and then we talk about the holiness of the land of Israel. Portion number 7, which is called Kedoshim. Different commandment of how to conduct ourselves. Different commandments in how to conduct ourselves. Holiness, we talk about holiness. Kedoshim tihiyu, to be holy. What does that mean? Okay, we can spend days and days and weeks discussing what it means to be holy. We talk about parents, parenting, to be a parent, to honor your parents. Shabbat again, idols, charity, honesty, love your friend. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is in the Torah. Love your neighbor like yourself. Love your fellow like yourself. Right? Is in the Torah. It's not from any other Bibles or iterations of testaments. Right? The forbidden mixtures of clothes, known as shatnez, of wool and linen. Weights and measures, punishments, penalties for forbidden relationships, the land and immortality, and then holiness, and again, kashrut laws are all mentioned in Kedoshim. Then we have Emor. This is dealing with holiness. So those two portions, Achremot 6 and 7, we're dealing with the holiness of the nation. And now we're going to deal with the holiness of priests and the holidays. In the 8th portion of Emor, of Leviticus, we have the laws of the sanctity of a Kohen, disqualifying blemishes of a Kohen. A Kohen he couldn't have blemishes, physical blemishes or otherwise, safeguarding the sanctity and the holiness of that position. We talk about the teruma, which is the donations that were given.
What are the
One second. The blemishes of animals, desecration and sanctification of God's name, we're warned about. We're instructed about the festivals of Passover, the Omer, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret. We talk about the menorah, the holiness of the menorah, the showbread, and the blasphemer. Yes, question.
Well, the blemishes of the priest. I was just wondering.
What are they?
Yeah. What?
So I will instruct you, please, to right up there on the third to top shelf. We have the book over there, the Sefer HaChinuch. I can pull out the exact laws that discuss. And you can learn all about those blemishes and what disqualifies a Kohen from being. But the Sefer HaChinuch doesn't just make up the rules; they're obviously all orally transmitted, because the Torah doesn't give you all the details. It doesn't tell you the how; it tells you the what. That's the big mistake people make by trying to disassociate the written Torah from the oral Torah. And try to separate it, say, oh, it's just a bunch of rabbis made up a bunch of rules. That's ignorance. It's stupidity, right? There's no way to know any of these laws we just discussed without the oral Torah that was given at Mount Sinai as well, and was orally transmitted from generation to generation till it was written down in the Mishnah, elaborated on in the Talmud, and then later on expanded through all of the books we have here, and those that we don't have here as well, in our magnificent library. The 9th portion is Parshas Behar, and Behar and Bechukotai, the last two portions in Leviticus, deal with the holiness of the land of Israel. We talk about the Shemitah, the sabbatical year. We talk about the Yovel, the Jubilee year. We talk about the redemption of the land. We talk about the prevention of poverty. And we talk about Jewish slaves that are freed. Now, sabbatical year is incredible, because that's one of those promises that are given in the Torah that prove that the Torah is divine, because it's impossible for any human being to give such a promise that you will get a triple crop on the 6th year. Don't work on the 7th, because I got you covered. I'm going to cover you the 6th year, 7th year, and 8th year till you get back to yourself after your sabbatical year to get your crops up and running. You're still not going to. Where's your income going to come from? God says, I got you covered. Right? Moses can't make such a promise. No rabbi can make such a promise. No sage can make such a promise. Only God can make such a promise. The 10th portion is talking about the miracles of blessing and curse. It's a very interesting thing. God says, listen, you follow my ordinances, you'll be rewarded, you'll be blessed. If you don't, you'll be cursed. And we have the admonitions, the punishments, and then we have, of course, the discussion immediately after of the gifts of the temple. We do a census, the tithes of animals, and if we conduct our lives properly, we will live with prosperity. And the question is that people ask, well, I know many people who may be observing, and they don't exactly have the most prosperous of life. Well, it depends what we define as prosperous. Does prosperous only mean money? Does prosperous only mean having a job? Or success in what we consider success as worldly pursuits? Perhaps success is something totally different. Perhaps success does not mean something temporary like this world. Perhaps success means something which is eternal and forever. Next week, I'm going to ask my brother for permission to begin the class, and we'll do at 7 o'clock. We'll start, and we'll finish off Numbers and Deuteronomy, and then he can do his finishing up of the 5 millennia in 5 weeks. So it'll give him more time, and then we'll complete our learning. For now, my friends, thank you very much to those of you online for joining us. You are welcome to like them and share them, and thank you to all of you who have been doing so beautifully and loyally and lovingly, I hope, right? To share this Torah with the world. And I look forward to continuing our learning next week. Tomorrow.